Hey guys, Kurt from Time Machine Transport. Just sitting outside the VA. I got to get a MRI on my neck in a little bit, and I freaking popped my damn bicep at the shop a couple days ago. So I'm batting 500 right now. So I got to get this MRI done so I can so they can give me a shot or something. Man, I got to get back on the road. My wife would tell you I don't do very well when I'm home for a while. Anyways, I'm one of those road guys, I guess. But hi, baby, I love you. So these riot things, martial law hasn't come yet, thank God, or it hasn't come at all so far. So I mean, I guess it's kind of, people are like, oh, there is a martial law. I mean, maybe a little bit, I think, maybe, but I hate that damn tooth. My wife loves crooked teeth. Not fang face crooked, but she loves imperfections. I guess that's why she loves me. But anyways, that's not what the video is about. So I guess there's and I always say it, there's always, if you can't find a positive out of a negative, you're not searching hard enough. And there is a positive out of this negative with all these riots and looting. And that is, there was a question in people's minds, at least in mine, I've done several videos on it, that people need to organize and get together and so on and so forth. So the positive out of this negative is, I mean, it showed that people can unite. And I'm talking about the peaceful protesters, not the looters. Oh, damn it. Not the looters and rioters. This fucking nerve, man, is getting on my fucking nerves. So it does show that people can unite and come together when they really are passionate for something. And that's a great thing. So that's the positive out of the negative. That, you know, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, minus the obviously the heinous people that were out there doing the wrong things. I guess there was $2.1 million worth of Rolexes stolen, or the guy went in and said there was $2.1 million stolen of Rolexes, and he put some in the safe or whatever. I don't know. That's just a large number of Rolexes. And also, well, here's a fun fact for you. So people, I don't know if you know, I didn't know, where and when the Republican Party was formed. It was actually formed in Wisconsin, in a little town called Ripon, Wisconsin. And it was formed in 1854. Some people were seriously mad at, just looking at my clock to make sure I got to be up there at 6:30. People were mad about the slavery, some sort of, in Nebraska and some other state, these people got together because they weren't happy. They were I guess some of the states, the two states, I know one was Nebraska, I forgot the other one. They were sick and tired of having the slavery, you know, kind of go the other way, I guess, pro and con, slavery, I guess, or for and against slavery. I don't know if Nebraska or the other state were for or against slavery, but anyways, the people in Ripon, these people had gotten together in Ripon, Wisconsin, and were fed up with it, and they formed the Republican Party in 1854. There's a fun fact for you. So I guess there's more information coming out that Mr. Floyd and this cop worked together, and the club that they worked for, I don't think it was under investigation, but it was being watched. I guess there was a bunch of nefarious activity going on out or in that club. There was a bunch of nefarious activities, and there was also, I guess, and this could all be, you know, rumor or whatever, but more and more people are saying, it's on Fox and stuff like that, Floyd and this cop knew each other, where they worked as security guards at this club, and it's quite possible that Mr. Floyd either knew something he wasn't supposed to know and he needed to be silenced, which regardless is still a murder, And they wanted to make it look like a black on or a white on black crime. Who knows, right? Also, that, or he may have saw something that he wasn't supposed to see, and this whole thing, they needed to silence him. I think personally, and you can't trust the government, obviously. I think that it was a sacrifice to start a race war or to create or start a civil war. Regardless, it's a horrible thing. So it seems like the country's getting back. Well, not really getting back, but the bad rioting and the looting are coming to a minimum, which is nice. But I think this was training for them to invoke martial law on us, because if you go back in, I don't know, 10 or 20 videos ago, I said that the first and second day, I said definitely the first, maybe the second day, probably the second day, you will be able to get out of a big city or metropolis or whatever, and get out of Dodge before it gets bad, before they lock us all down. And damn, I thought it was a big ass spot on my shirt, but it's a shadow. So if you see what happened during the riots, it took the cops and well, not necessarily the National Guard, because they were called in later. But it took the cops days, like 3 or 4 days. I mean, they didn't know what to do, because they were just overwhelmed and overpowered. So they didn't know what to do. And even when the National Guard came in Minnesota, or Minneapolis, same state, obviously, city of Minnesota, or Minneapolis, the city of Minnesota, how even after the National Guard came in, this stuff still happens, it's still, with all the crazy rioting and looting and everything else. And they still didn't do anything. These governors and the mayors, first off, because they can make that call, and then the governor will back it up and call in the National Guard. But it seemed like they were just lost. Like they didn't know what to do. And I don't blame them. I mean, they all have families, these cops and National Guard and everything, and the situation was getting pretty hairy. So they were, I'm sure they wanted to go home to their families at the end of the day. So it shows you that when they go to lock us down, which they will, I'm sure. I don't know why it didn't happen this time. Probably because this is probably their training. And just like I said in one of my videos, with the nursing staff, and my analogy to it was, with the hospital staff and all these other medical facilities, they reduced their staff down to 40%. So they took away 60% of the staff. And my analogy to that was, well, it's like a basketball team. You have 5 players that are your starters, and then you have a strong bench. So when your starters get tired, you take another player off the bench to fill in the place of the starter, so the starter can get some rest, and then you put the starter back out. So my analogy of it was that's what they were doing with the medical facilities and everything. They were reducing them down to 40%. So when this does all happen, they could bring in the other 60%, and now you'd have a super refreshed staff that basically you bring those guys in and gals in, and you take your starters out and let them rest. That's kind of what happened. Or I think that's during that video I had said that you definitely have a first day and probably the second day, but definitely not the third day, to get out of Dodge. And what just happened over the last 7 days or 8 days is very apparent that you can get out of Dodge the first and the second day, that nothing's going to I mean, obviously the people that are out there rioting and looting and everything, you'll have a challenge with those people. But essentially the first and second day, you'll be able to pretty much get out of Dodge without being harmed, hopefully. But this obviously, with this looting and rioting, this is all perfect training for the National Guard and the police departments, because no one's ever, I mean, this generation, I mean, back in the 60s, you know, the police were, they knew how to handle riots and so on and so forth. And I'm sure probably the National Guard did as well, because all around the country, you know, Martin Luther King, with his marches and everything else, you know, they had these cops and National Guard had to have some kind of experience. But the current generation of cops and National Guard, they don't have any experience. So this is definitely good training for them. So when they do invoke martial law on us, now they're all going to be properly trained. So something to think about, I guess. But yeah, so like I said, that's the positive out of the negative, is you can see how people will stand and unite. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not talking about the protesters and the bad rioters and looters that were out destroying stuff and killing people and everything else. But it is refreshing when you see these peaceful protesters banding together. And it's just, you know, it is refreshing. So like I said, that's the positive out of the negative. But I got to get up to the VA or get upstairs so I can get this MRI done. And I hope this video finds you guys well. And please like and subscribe to the channel. Ciao.